I've been to a lot of funerals in my life. Too many if I'm honest. But I'd never seen one like this. The rain hadn't started yet, but you could feel it waiting in the sky, that heavy gray pressure that makes everything feel slower, quieter, like the world itself is holding its breath. The village square was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder, some holding umbrellas they didn't need yet, others clutching tissues they'd already soaked through. At the center of it all was a small white coffin. Inside it, dressed in pink with her hands folded across her chest, was a little girl, maybe 7 years old, maybe 8. Her name was Elena, though I didn't know her well. I'd seen her around playing near the church steps, chasing chickens by the road, laughing in that wild, fearless way kids do before the world teaches them to be careful. But what I'll never forget wasn't the coffin, it was the dog, a German shepherd, lying right beside it. His body was pressed so close to the wood that you'd think he was trying to crawl inside. His head rested on his paws, but his eyes, those deep amber eyes, were locked on her face through the glass. He didn't blink. He didn't move. At first, people whispered. Then someone tried to lead him away. An older woman, maybe an aunt, bent down and tugged gently at his collar. He growled. Not loud, not aggressive, just low and steady, like a warning that came from somewhere deeper than his throat. The woman stepped back, her hand shaking. Leave him, someone muttered. He's grieving. But it didn't look like grief. Not the kind I knew anyway. Grief is messy. It's tears and shaking shoulders and people who can't stand still. This dog wasn't falling apart. He was waiting. Someone brought him water. He didn't look at it. Someone else crouched down with a bowl of food, trying to coax him, speaking in that soft sing-song voice people use with animals and babies. He didn't even turn his head. His gaze never left Elena. I watched him for a long time. Watched the way his ears would twitch at certain sounds. Footsteps, a sob, the scrape of a chair, but his body stayed frozen. Watched the slow rise and fall of his ribs, like he was breathing just enough to stay alive and nothing more. How long has he been like this? I asked the man standing next to me. Since they brought her here this morning, he said quietly. Won't eat, won't drink. Couple of guys tried to pull him off earlier and he snapped at them, not to hurt, just to warn. Like he's protecting her. I looked back at the dog. His nose was inches from the coffin glass. If I didn't know better, I'd say he was listening, waiting for her to breathe. The priest began to speak, but I barely heard him. My eyes kept drifting back to that shepherd. There was something in the way he held himself, tense, coiled like a spring wound too tight. Like at any second, he expected her to sit up, to call his name, to need him. A woman in the front row started crying harder. The sound broke through the thick air, raw and guttural. The dog's ears flicked toward her, but he didn't move, didn't acknowledge her. It was like nothing else in the world existed except that little girl in the box. I don't know why, but a chill ran through me. This wasn't just a loyal pet saying goodbye. This was something else. Something I couldn't name yet, but could feel. Heavy and aching in my chest. As they prepared to close the coffin, the dog shifted for the first time. Just his head, lifting slightly, tilting as if to get a better angle. His breathing quickened. I saw his chest heave once, twice, and then, just before the lid came down, he let out the smallest whine, not loud, barely audible, but it cut through everything. It was the sound of something breaking. The crowd fell silent. Even the priest stopped mid-sentence. That's when I realized something no one else had said out loud yet. Everyone thought the dog was grieving, but they had no idea why he wouldn't move. After the service, people lingered. They didn't leave the way they usually do after funerals. Quiet, respectful, eager to get back to their own lives. Instead, they stood in small clusters near the church steps, talking in low voices, glancing back toward the coffin, toward the dog. He was still there, still hadn't moved. Someone had draped a blanket over his back, but he'd shrugged it off within seconds. Now it lay crumpled beside him, ignored. I found myself standing with a group of older women, the kind who know everything that happens in a village before it even finishes happening. One of them, Maria, kept dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief that had seen better days. That dog, she said, shaking her head. He was with her every single day. Every day. I saw them all the time, another woman added. He'd walk her to school in the mornings, never on a leash, just beside her, like a shadow. She'd put her hand on his head, while they walked. Maria said softly, like she needed him to steady her. I thought about that. A little girl, small and fragile, resting her hand on the broad, solid head of a German shepherd, trusting him completely. He slept outside her bedroom door at night. Someone else chimed in. My daughter lives next door. She said you could see him through the window sometimes, just lying there in the hallway, wouldn't go anywhere else. A man I didn't recognize spoke up from the edge of the group. He had the rough hands of someone who worked outdoors, and his voice carried a weight that made people stop and listen. You all remember what happened last summer, he said, when she almost got hit by that car. A few heads nodded. I was there, he continued. Saw the whole thing. She was chasing a ball into the road. Didn't even look. That dog lunged, grabbed the back of her dress with his teeth and yanked her backwards so hard she fell on her backside. The car missed her by inches. He paused, his jaw tight. Driver didn't even stop. Maria crossed herself. Dios mio, I didn't know it was that close. The dog didn't let her near the road for weeks after that, the man said. Every time she got close, he'd step in front of her, block her path. She'd laugh and try to go around him, but he wouldn't let her. The group fell quiet for a moment. I glanced back toward the coffin. The dog's head was still resting on his paws, but I noticed something I hadn't before. Every few seconds, his nose would twitch, like he was catching a scent, searching for something. What about when she got sick? I asked. Did he act strange then? Maria's face darkened. Strange doesn't even cover it, she said. 3 nights before she collapsed, that dog wouldn't stop barking. My sister lives 2 houses down. She said it went on for hours. Deep, urgent barking, like he was trying to warn someone. We all thought he was just being loud. Another woman admitted. Someone even yelled at him to shut up, but he didn't stop. Maria continued. Not until Elena's mother finally came outside to check on him. He ran straight to Elena's window, kept jumping up, pawing at the glass. And, I pressed. Maria's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They found her on the floor of her bedroom, burning with fever. If they'd waited another hour, she didn't finish the sentence. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't just a loyal dog. This was something deeper, something I couldn't explain, but couldn't ignore either. He knew, I said quietly. He always knew, Maria agreed. Before any of us did. I looked back at the shepherd one more time. He'd lifted his head now, just slightly, and his ears were swiveling, tracking sounds, movements, voices, but his eyes stayed fixed on Elena. Someone walked past him with a tray of food meant for the family. The dog didn't even glance at it. Someone else tried to offer him water again. He turned his head away. Why won't he eat? A younger woman asked. No one answered. Because deep down, I think we all knew. This wasn't just a pet saying goodbye. This was a guardian who didn't understand why his job was over. They were getting ready to close the coffin. The priest had finished his final prayers. The family had said their goodbyes, or tried to. Elena's mother hadn't been able to stand for the last 10 minutes. 2 relatives were holding her up, and even from where I stood, I could hear the sound of her grief. Raw, unbearable. But the dog, he hadn't made a sound since that single quiet whine. Until now. As 2 men stepped forward to lower the coffin lid, the German shepherd suddenly lurched to his feet. The movement was so abrupt, so unexpected, that everyone froze. He didn't bark, didn't growl, he whined. It started low, almost like a hum in his chest, and then it grew, louder, sharper, desperate. He pressed his body against the coffin, his paws scrabbling at the wood, and then he did something that made my throat tighten. He placed his head directly on Elena's chest, right over her heart, and he wouldn't move. Get him off, someone whispered urgently. But no one moved. No one could move. Because the sound coming out of that dog wasn't just a whine anymore. It was a plea. High-pitched, broken, like he was begging her for something only she could give. Please. Elena's mother sobbed from across the room. Please. Someone. Her voice cracked, and she collapsed into her sister's arms. That's when Elena's uncle stepped forward. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that didn't show much emotion. But when he spoke, his voice was shaking. He stayed with her, he said. Everyone turned to look at him. When she collapsed, he continued, his words coming slow and heavy. It was raining. Cold. She'd been walking home from school, and he stopped, swallowing hard. She went down in the middle of the road. Just dropped. Maria gasped beside me. The dog was with her, the uncle went on. He didn't run for help. He didn't bark. He laid on top of her, covered her whole body with his, kept her warm. My chest tightened. For how long? Someone asked. Hours. The word landed like a stone. We didn't even know she was missing at first, he said, his voice breaking now. It was getting dark. Her mother was frantic. We went looking, and when we found them, he paused, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. The dog was soaked through, shivering, but he wouldn't move. Not even when we tried to pull him off. He was keeping her warm, I whispered. The uncle nodded. We got her to the hospital. They said if she'd been out there any longer, in that rain, in that cold, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. The silence in that room was suffocating. I looked at the dog. He was still pressed against the coffin, his head on her chest, his whole body trembling, and then I understood. He wasn't guarding her. He was waiting for her. He doesn't know. Maria breathed beside me. Know what? Someone asked. He doesn't know she's gone. The words hit me like a punch, because she was right. Every time Elena had been in danger, the car, the fever, the collapse, he'd stayed with her, protected her, waited until she woke up, until she was okay again, and she'd always woken up. Always. So why would this time be any different? I watched as the dog's ears suddenly pricked forward. His nose twitched against her dress. He was listening. Still listening. For a heartbeat that wasn't there. For a breath that would never come. Elena's mother let out a sound I'll never forget. Not a scream. Not a sob. Something in between. Something that sounded like her heart was being torn in half. The two men who'd been waiting to close the coffin stepped back. One of them had tears running down his face. No one spoke. No one moved. Because in that moment, we all felt it. The weight of a love so deep, so absolute, that it didn't understand the difference between sleep and death. The dog whined again, softer this time, almost like a question. And when Elena didn't answer, he finally slowly lifted his head. He looked at her face for a long, long moment. Then he stepped back, just one step, and sat down beside the coffin, waiting. No one tried to move him after that. The two men stood there with their hands still on the coffin lid, but they didn't lower it. They just waited, looking at the priest, at the family, at each other, waiting for permission that no one could give. Elena's mother had gone silent. She wasn't crying anymore. Not because the grief had passed, but because I think she'd run out of ways to express it. She just stared at the dog, her face pale and hollow. The German shepherd sat perfectly still beside the coffin. His posture was different now. Not tense, not coiled, just resigned. Like he'd finally accepted something he didn't want to believe. But he wasn't leaving. The priest cleared his throat softly. We should wait, Elena's mother whispered. Everyone looked at her. She pulled away from her sister's arms and walked forward on unsteady legs. Slowly, carefully, like she might shatter if she moved too fast. When she reached the coffin, she knelt down beside the dog. For a moment she just looked at him. Then, with a trembling hand, she reached out and placed it on his head. Thank you, she whispered. The dog's ears flicked toward her, but he didn't turn. His eyes stayed on Elena. Thank you for keeping her warm, she continued, her voice breaking. Thank you for bringing her home. Thank you for... She stopped, her breath hitching. Thank you for loving her. I don't know if dogs understand words like that, but I swear something shifted in him when she said it. He leaned into her hand. Just slightly. Just enough. And then, for the first time since I'd arrived, he looked away from Elena. He turned his head and looked at her mother. There was something in his eyes, something that made my chest ache. Not confusion, not grief. Permission. Like he was asking if it was okay to let go. Elena's mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. It's okay, she whispered. You can rest now. The dog held her gaze for another moment. Then he turned back to the coffin one last time. He stood slowly, stiffly, like his legs didn't want to carry him anymore. He leaned forward, and gently, so gently, pressed his nose against the glass one more time, against Elena's hand, and then he licked it. Just once. The sound that came from the crowd was like a collective exhale. I heard sobs breaking out in every corner of the room. Even the men who'd been standing stone-faced were wiping at their eyes now. The dog stepped back. He turned, and he walked to the far corner of the room, near the wall, and lay down, not facing away. Still watching, but giving them space to do what needed to be done. The priest nodded quietly to the two men. They lowered the lid. The sound of it closing, soft, final, echoed in the silence. And that's when the dog tilted his head back and let out a howl. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp or sudden. It was long and low and so full of sorrow that I felt it in my bones. It rolled through the room like a wave. And when it finally faded, no one moved. No one spoke. We just stood there, broken by the sound of a heart that had loved without condition and lost without understanding why. They buried Elena that afternoon in the village cemetery, under a tree that was just starting to bloom. The dog followed the procession. No one led him. No one called him. He just walked behind the coffin, his head low, his steps slow and deliberate. When they lowered her into the ground, He sat at the edge of the grave and watched. People began to leave, one by one, then in groups, until the cemetery was nearly empty. But the dog stayed. I stayed too. I don't know why. Maybe because leaving felt like betrayal. Maybe because I needed to see how this ended. As the sun started to dip below the hills, casting long shadows across the graves, the German shepherd finally moved. He walked to the fresh mound of earth and lay down beside it. His head rested on his paws, his eyes half closed, and he stayed there as the light faded and the first stars appeared. I left him there that night, but I came back the next morning. He was still there. Some hearts don't understand death, only love.